Daniel, number 2. Daniel and the King's Dream.
One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a very strange dream that woke him up. While he lay awake, he was so upset by the dream that he could not go back to sleep. The king decided that this troubling dream must have a deep meaning.
In the morning, I'll call the wise men and have them explain the dream.
Morning came at last, and the king gave orders to call all of his wise men to tell him his dream. We don't know whether the king couldn't remember his dream, or if this was his way of testing his wise men. Whatever the case, when the king's wise men all came and stood before him, he said to them,
I've had a very strange dream, and I'm eager to know what it means.
"O king, live forever," the Chaldean said. "Tell us your dream, and we will tell you what it means."
The king answered, This is my final word. If you do not tell me what I dreamed and what it means, you will all be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a garbage dump. But if you tell me my dream and explain its meaning, I will give you rich gifts, a reward, and great honor from me. So tell me my dream and tell me what it means, and all will be well.
How puzzled the wise men were. Surely the king was confused. How could any person know what someone else had dreamed? The wise men pleaded with the king.
"But you must tell us the dream before we can explain it to you."
King Nebuchadnezzar replied,
I know you are trying to buy some time, but my word is final. Tell me my dream, and then I will know that you can tell me the correct interpretation.
Again the wise men tried to reason with the king.
"No one on the entire planet can do what the king requests. No king, no matter how great and powerful, would ever think of asking his priests, mediums, sorcerers, or Chaldeans to do this. What the king is asking is so impossible that only the gods can do it, and they don't live on this planet."
When King Nebuchadnezzar heard the wise men's reply, he became violently angry. He was so furious that he ordered that every one of the wise men in Babylon should be killed. At once the king sent Arioch, the captain of the guard, to go out and execute all the wise men in Babylon. The decree was issued, and the news traveled quickly throughout the kingdom. When Daniel learned of it, he went to find Arioch, the captain of the guard. Arioch had already gone out to execute the wise men. Daniel found Arioch and spoke to him with wisdom and discretion. "Why is the decree from the king so harsh?" he asked Arioch. Arioch explained what had happened in the palace, and when Daniel heard it, he immediately went to speak with the king. Soon Daniel stood before the king and asked him for more time so he could give the king the interpretation of the dream. King Nebuchadnezzar granted Daniel's request, so the wise men were saved from being executed for the moment. Daniel left the king's palace and went to his house and told his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, about the matter. You may know his 3 friends by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Even though no person was wise enough to tell the king what he had dreamed, God knew what he had dreamed. Earnestly the 4 young men prayed for God's help. They asked for mercy concerning this mystery, so Daniel and his 3 friends would not be killed with the rest of Babylon's wise men. That night, God showed Daniel the king's dream and its meaning. The next morning when Daniel awoke, he was so thankful he began praising God. Daniel 2:23 says, I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's demand. Quickly Daniel went to Arioch, the captain of the guard, and said, Do not kill the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king. I will give him the interpretation of his dream. Arioch was glad to hear this good news. He quickly brought Daniel before the king. Arioch and Daniel stood before King Nebuchadnezzar. Arioch reported,
I have found a man among the captives of Judah who will tell you the interpretation of your dream."
The king looked at Daniel, who he knew by the name Belteshazzar, and asked,
"Can you really tell me the dream I had and its interpretation?"
Daniel answered the king, "No wise man, medium, priest, or astrologer is able to make known this mystery, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. In this dream, God has let Nebuchadnezzar know what will happen in the last days. Your dream and the thoughts that came into your head were about what will happen in the future. God, the revealer of mysteries, has let you know what will happen. This mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom, but so this interpretation might be made known to you, the king, and so you may understand the thoughts of your mind. My king, as you were watching, a giant statue of a man appeared standing in front of you. That statue, tall and shiny, was terrifying. The head of the statue was pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its stomach and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. As you were watching, a stone broke off without a hand touching it. It began rolling toward the giant statue and struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay. The stone crushed the feet, and the entire statue was broken into pieces, as fine as dust, and the wind blew them away. No trace of the statue could be found, but the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was your dream." The king did not disagree or argue with Daniel about the dream. This was exactly what King Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. Daniel continued, "Now I will tell you what this dream means. Your Majesty, you are king over all people of the earth. God has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. Wherever people live on the earth, or wild animals and birds, God has handed them over to you and made you ruler over them all. You, King Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. After you will come a lesser king, represented by the chest and arms of silver. The third kingdom will follow, as seen in the belly and thighs of brass. The fourth kingdom is seen in the iron legs and feet. You saw the feet and toes, partly of clay and partly of iron. The fourth kingdom will be a divided kingdom. Part of the kingdom will be strong, and part will be brittle. The people will mix with one another, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. In the days of these kings, Daniel continued, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. His kingdom is represented by the stone, not moved with hands, that destroyed the image. It will crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself endure forever. You saw the stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it, and it crushed the iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold. The great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation certain." Nebuchadnezzar was amazed. He bowed down to the floor to show special respect to Daniel. The king gave orders to present gifts and incense to Daniel and said, "Your God indeed is God of gods, Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, since you are able to reveal this great mystery." The king gave Daniel many generous gifts. Then he promoted Daniel and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. Because Daniel had interpreted the king's dream, the wise men were not killed. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego to manage the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained in the king's court. Daniel had confidence that God could do a never-seen-before miracle. You may remember that Joseph in the Old Testament had interpreted dreams with God's help, but he did not have to reconstruct the dream of another person. This was something that Daniel had never heard of God doing, yet he had faith that God could do it. Nebuchadnezzar knew that it wasn't Daniel that had revealed these things, but it was Daniel's God who had revealed this dream to Daniel. Daniel wanted the glory to go to God, and it did. There are many things we can learn from this lesson. I've thought of 3, maybe you can think of more. First, Daniel was in a situation where only God could rescue him and meet his need. Therefore, he knew how important it was for both him and his companions to pray. Just like Daniel, when we find ourselves in what looks like an impossible situation, we need to remember to pray. God can still do the impossible. Second, when Daniel awoke, he immediately began praising God for the answer to his prayer. Daniel had faith to believe that God really had revealed the king's dream to him. He began praising God even before he talked to the king and found out for sure that he had really been shown what King Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. Our faith is often shown by how long it takes us to start praising God. We can begin to praise God for the answer to our prayers even before He answers. Third, Daniel not only had his life spared, he was also promoted to a high office. But getting promoted or recognized by the king wasn't what Daniel was after. Daniel loved God and was committed to obeying Him no matter what it cost. Daniel didn't know how the king would react to the interpretation of the dream, but Daniel faithfully delivered God's message to the king. Daniel's life reflected the message in 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. 1 John 2:15. Does your life reflect this message?